Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Nothing ever ages well with this administration because this administration is almost never telling the truth. If you're going to constantly lie and constantly cope, well then you're going to get constantly caught out. That is just the reality of the situation. And that's why I was so confident in the video that I posted yesterday that Joe Biden's statements on the economy wouldn't age well, and would you look at that, it seems as though the CPI reading was exactly what I predicted. I mean, literally exactly the numbers that I said it would be. I said most likely that CPI would hover around the same as it was last month. It was identical, dropping only 0.1%. And I also said that core CPI and service costs would go up. Core CPI is still trending upwards. Last month's core CPI was an incredibly bearish number, while the reading we just got for September was even worse. And so Joe Biden again looks like a fool. And it's very simply because he's a liar. It's not like I'm some sort of genius who's able to predict the future of the economy. It's just that I'm looking at things honestly with a real understanding or an acceptance of basic reality and what's happening with costs. And Joe Biden is pushing straight up copium and propaganda and is just refusing to accept the basic realities. That is the fundamental difference. And man, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse for Sleepy Joe and his ridiculous administration as the truth comes to surface, as all of his lies continue to backfire and expose him for the dishonest, lying hack that he is. And once again, we have a couple statements here. We have a couple stances from the administration that really aren't aging well. We're going to start off with Saudi Arabia because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia continues to set the record straight and embarrass him. You know, I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of constantly pointing out that Saudi Arabia is correct, but the simple fact of the matter is that they are in these cases in this situation, and it's Joe Biden who continues to act completely ridiculous. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so yesterday we covered this clip from Joe Biden's copium interview.
By the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East.
Joe Biden claims that he never went to the Saudis to beg them for oil. It wasn't even about oil, Joe Biden says. And instantly, Joe Biden gets absolutely wrecked as the Saudis correct the record again. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia just released this public statement. An official at the Foreign Ministry in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia stated that the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has viewed the statements issued about the kingdom following the OPEC Plus decision announced on October 5th, 2022, which have described the decision as the kingdom taking sides in international conflict and that it was politically motivated against the United States of America. The government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would first like to express its total rejection of these statements that are not based on facts and which are based on portraying the OPEC Plus decision out of its purely economic context. This decision was taken unanimously by all member states of the OPEC group. The kingdom affirms that the outcomes of the OPEC Plus meetings are adopted through consensus among member states and that they are not based on the unilateral decision by a single country. The outcomes are purely based on economic considerations that take into account maintaining balance of supply and demand in the oil markets, as well as aim to limit volatility that does not serve the interest of consumers and producers, as has always been the case within OPEC+. The OPEC+ group makes its decisions independently in accordance with established independent practices followed by the international organizations. The government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would also like to clarify that based on its belief in the importance of dialogue and exchange of views with its allies and partners outside the OPEC+ group regarding the situation in the oil markets, the government of the kingdom clarified through its continuous consultation with the US administration that all economic analyses indicate that postponing the OPEC Plus decision for a month, according to what has been suggested, would have had negative economic consequences. And that right there is the smoking gun. While it's clearly a little bit vague, they're not taking a direct shot. What they're saying there is that Joe Biden's administration wanted them to postpone this decision by a month, conveniently right after the midterms. And they told Joe to take a hike. This is why we were seeing reports that people in the White House were livid. We were hearing reports of people being pissed in the White House after the OPEC Plus decision, because as the Saudis are now saying, Joe Biden's administration was clearly the group that was trying to politicize this situation. Once again, it shows how stupid the Brandon regime really is. He's putting his political future in the hands of the Saudis and expecting them to make decisions in his best interest. How dumb do you have to be for this to be your approach when it comes to foreign policy? The Saudis are considered allies, sure. I mean, of course that topic is debatable, but it's hard to say that they're our friends. and they're certainly not our family. You know, extremely close friends and relatives, you expect them to take a little bit of sacrifice to benefit you, to help you. The Saudis are, if anything, our adversary. The United States is the biggest oil producer on the planet, producing 18 million barrels of oil a day. And of course, those 18 million barrels of oil aren't enough to meet domestic needs. Therefore, the United States is dependent on the Saudis. And of course, even the Russians and even Canada. It's like I keep repeating, I mean, I've said it a million times, but Joe Biden has given up all of his leverage. He's played into his adversary's hands, and now he's confused and he's angry when they don't bend over backwards for him. Joe, you're stupid. Plain and simple. I don't get what this guy is doing. And he takes it to a whole other level now with his diplomacy, or his lack of diplomacy. His response to screwing up this whole situation with the Saudis is to attack the Saudis. What are you doing, man? Going to Saudi Arabia to beg them to pump more oil or to beg them to not make this decision until after the midterms, which they clearly and unequivocally state never happened, and then turning around and saying that they're making their decision based on US electoral politics when that's what you're doing. How to ruin a relationship 101. And this is the second time that the Saudis dunk on him. It's a total disgrace. It's a global embarrassment. And it shows Joe Biden's absolute incompetence on the world stage. This guy is the biggest clown out there. And foreign leaders, foreign nations are running circles around him, laughing at him and making him look like a complete fool over and over and over again. But man, we've got to move away from the Saudi thing, as frustrating as it is, and I always go on rants every time I mention it. There's another Joe Biden statement and Joe Biden stance that isn't aging very well, or Biden regime stance. Remember when they kept telling us that inflation's not a big deal and it's just transitory?
This is something that will settle down.
Transitory.
Transitory.
And the data shows that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary. There's nobody suggesting there's unchecked inflation on the way.
Well, we just got the September CPI reading, and inflation hit at 8.1%, and that's with the reduction in oil prices during the month of September, which Joe Biden kept taking victory laps over. Of course, since the OPEC decision in early October, it's spiking once again. But inflation is still not transitory. It's still consistently high at over 8%, and core CPI beat expectations at 6.6%, meaning the cost of everything else. Goods, services, literally everything that isn't energy, and the cost of food. A big driver for last month's CPI increase was actually rent costs, meaning rents across America are now starting to rise in respect to the interest rates. And so the inflation crisis continues. It seems as though Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act didn't work like he thought it would. Who would have seen that one coming? And just to wrap up this video, I mean, the conclusion of this video is that Joe Biden is a horrible, disingenuous, lying hack who is just saying things and just playing politics. And that's why in a very unstable and volatile time like today, where things are expected to be relatively negative across the board, all of his statements aren't aging well, and Joe Biden continues to look like a monumental liar. Oh, and I forgot to mention this earlier, so I might as well at the end. Joe Biden pointed at the Saudis and claimed that they're just playing politics with their decision on the oil markets, as Joe Biden himself continues to release oil from the strategic oil reserves, which, by the way, the strategic petroleum reserves just hit its lowest level since I think the 1970s, and he's doing this irresponsibly to affect oil prices ahead of the midterms to benefit himself politically going into the next election. Oil reserves, which are supposed to be used in emergency cases only, he's using for political and electoral gain, as he accuses others of playing politics with oil production. I can't stand this guy. Everything he does bothers me, and it's because everything that he does is politically motivated and disingenuous, and if you're paying attention, that fact is incredibly obvious. That's what I got for you guys though. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.